DIYers, what's going on? Mike Boards with the Mike Boards channel. Hey, thanks for watching. We are working on a boat today, and this is part 4 of our entire Bellows replacement project. Let's get started. All right, DIYers at the Craftsman Workstation, and again, this is part 4 of our big project, and we're replacing our bellows, shift cable, gimbal bearing, grease seal, etc. And what we'll do is pick up right where we left off. Scrolling above right now is a link to part 3. It'll bring you up to speed where we're at right now. Let's take a closer look. To the workbench, let's head to the left side where we have our schematics of the bell housing, the bellows, the gimbal ring, and the transom. Following all of that to a T, this came from our exact serial number service manual. Additional parts. Bell housing, it's been cleaned up, ready for new bellows. There's the old ones. Nasty old water tube. So happy to replace that when that time comes. And here is the brand new trim senders and limit switch. Down below in the comment section as well as description section will be a link on where to purchase that. That is where we are going to start today's video, or part 4 of our project. We'll head back out to the boat and we are going to remove the old, damaged, and no good trim limit switch and sender switch, as well as all the wiring. I have installed a brand new gimbal bearing grease seal, which is behind that gimbal bearing, and a brand new sealed gimbal bearing as shown here. And we're going to come up top, and as you can see, there are 2 bolts and 2 wires and a connection cover. We'll match the bolts to a socket and loosen those up. At this point, the right tool goes a long way. As you can see, I've got an adjustable adapter into a 7/16 socket and my 3/8 ratchet. And this part right here converts a 3/8 into a 1/4, where I can get into my little adapter that's a 1/4 inch. I'm going to start by removing the bottom bolt closest to the gimbal bearing. And as you maneuver this into the area and onto that bolt, get a good grip of it, because the last thing you want to do is strip that bolt and not be able to get it out. And just a heads up, your new trim sender and limit switch kit does not come with replacement bolts. You will have to order those separately. And I'm going to use my right hand and finger as well as thumb to push on the top portion of the ratchet, as well as ensure that the socket does not fall off that bolt as I turn it. And it's tight, but it's moving. That's good. As you unscrew that, you can carefully move your gimbal ring to give you better access to that bolt, as well as switch to the smaller 1/4 inch so you don't jam the ratchet and socket and adapter in place between the bolt and gimbal ring. It is now loose to a point where I can unscrew the bolt by hand. And the bolt itself is just shy of 1 inch. Let's take a closer look inside now. Coming inside, and there is the hole that the bolt came out of. And DIYers, above that, again, a second bolt. And for all of you Alpha 1 Gen 1s, including ourselves, you have that second bolt. In the event that you have an Alpha 1 Gen 2 or any of the Bravos, you are lucky you do not have that second bolt. And as time went on, the manufacturers must have decided that adding that second bolt way up top was very inconvenient and a problem when it came time to servicing this portion of the engine and installing new wiring. So it's possible that they changed the design. However, again, we've got an Alpha 1 Gen 1 and we've got that upper bolt. We need to remove it. And again, Alpha 1 Gen 1 owners, just be patient. This is a very annoying and difficult step of the project. I'm coming in between the transom and gimbal ring. I've got my 7/16 wrench. Really, it's the only thing I can get up onto that upper bolt up there. And again, just be patient. This is not easy. And a quick update, as you can see, I am making progress by loosening up that bolt, and again, be patient. It is not easy. It's extremely annoying and a very tight space to work with. And again, the wrench is really the only tool we can use. If you try to get a socket in there, you'll end up jamming it, and that's not good. And at this point, I'm going to grab my pick tool, and I might just be able to loosen up. There we go. And from here, what I want to do is position the camera and show you how I am maneuvering my hand and fingers onto that bolt to unscrew it. I'm using my right hand, thumb, and first finger. I'm going to position it in like this and go up, in, and hopefully you can get your hand, thumb, and finger in there. And I've got a hold of the bolt, and again, I'm just going to hand loosen it from here. And it is out. There it is. Set that aside. And I'll continue pulling the plate out and down the wiring, just like that. And again, when it comes time to reinstall this securing clip or plate, the slit has to be basically on the left side at the 10 o'clock. Now to view the plate removed from that area, and I'm going to reach my hand up in here, grab both wires, and you'll notice this little rubber boot that serves the purpose of creating a watertight seal. I'll carefully pull that out. There's one side, and that side's pretty tough. I don't want to yank it, so I'm going to leave it as is. As you can see, there are two halves that create that rubber grommet or seal that goes inside that hole. Let's go inside the boat and check it out. Inside the boat now, where we've got our inboard engine, let's go to the back, and I'm looking at this wire right here that feeds through the transom and hull, and this is the wire to the trim sender. And in regards to our trim limit wiring, it comes in, not sure if you can see it, there it is right there, and it makes a 90-degree angle turn, feeds upstream, and a zip tie there, and then feeds all the way to that unit there. And there are the two connections. That is the wire right there. And as far as the trim sender wiring, again, right there, and it feeds upstream and makes a couple loops around this larger wiring harness that's taped together, and finally makes its way inside to this connection point right here. And I'm pulling the two wires out of the four that are right there, as you can see, to the opposite side, and there is the trim hydraulic motor and reservoir and the solenoid wiring, etc. However, coming inside here, at this point I recommend taking several photos to ensure when it comes time to re-secure the wiring, you know which ones go in. And again, here is the wiring. Be extra careful as you do this. The last thing you want to do is cut a wire. That would not be good. With that cut, I will remove the wiring. I'm also going to reinsert that red cable there. And again, that feeds all the way to these two connections right here, outside the boat and to the back of the boat. And what I'm going to do now, and obviously you want to ensure that your battery is not connected. Our battery is not even installed in the boat. I'm going to snip the wiring. And again, this was the trim sender starboard side. I'll remove the clip. And this is now junk. I'm going to take this opportunity while we're on this side to disconnect the fittings for the wiring, and one goes into a double green wire harness and the other one goes into a purple wire harness. When it comes time to re-secure everything, it does not matter which connection point goes into which one, and we have verified that with our exact serial number service manual. So disconnect those, and that is what they look like. What I'm going to do next is clip these off, as shown there. And again, here is the opposite end of our wiring. I am now going to tape a string trimmer or weed whacker line to it. And to an update, I wrapped about 6 inches of string trimmer line and gray line into orange electrical tape. And again, that trimmer line goes all the way up about 6 inches. The last thing I want this doing is coming disconnected as I pull it downstream and out of the back of the boat. Let's hop to the opposite side. I'm going to switch colors and do the same thing as here. To the opposite side, and again, the starboard side wiring feeds into those two screws and mounting points, and I'm going to carefully unscrew those. Again, this is a good time to take photos or video, as you want to ensure when it comes time to re-secure the new wiring, you secure it properly. Bottom screw is now removed, and a good time again to take photos or videos to ensure that you know how it came apart and what was connected to that screw. Top bolt is removed, and that part right there, make sure you don't drop that in the engine. And the way that goes on is that bulky block portion at the bottom will be on the bottom, and that rusted screw, in our case, on the bottom will go into that bulky block bottom portion. And in our case, both wire connections, again, one on the top screw, one on the bottom screw, each of these were the first connections that went on the screw or mount, and then there were 2 additional wires that went on these, one on each one. In other words, our trim sender wiring connections were positioned on the inner portion closest to this mount here. And just like the opposite side, I am going to cut those connection parts off. Taking a step back, what I did next was, again, grab the string trimmer or weed whacker line, and I used white electrical tape. We are going to color code the trim sender differently than the limit switch, just to ensure we don't get them goofed up as we pull them out and pull the new wiring in. What we'll do now is go to the back of the boat and pull the wiring through. And a quick tip, before we pull that wiring through, what I've done was tied each trimmer wire to something secured to alleviate me pulling it all the way through, as shown there. to the back of the boat and inside the transom. And now that I have clipped that zip tie that made it difficult to pull the trim limit switch wiring, I can pull these out. And I'll set the trim limit to the side, and I am going to pull out the trim sender switch, which is starboard. And again, the electrical tape should be white when it comes through. There it is. I will set that right there. Now to the trim limit wiring. And again, I tied the back side to ensure that I don't actually pull the string trimmer line all the way out during this stage of the project. And again, the trim limit switch should be orange. And it gets a little tough as it gets through that small hole. And there it is. As you can see here, trim sender, starboard side, trim limit, port side. And I'll pull this out just a little bit. Next, I cut a small, about a 1/2 inch size electrical tape, both orange and white. I'm going to add that to the port side trimmer cable, as shown here. And I'll do that as well to the trim sender switch wiring, as shown here. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'll feed that back in just a little bit. Again, white for trim sender, orange for trim limit. I'm now going to cut these away. And again, from here, I'm still organized. I've got the white for the trim sender or starboard side and the orange for the trim limit or port side. From here, I'll go grab the new wiring and tape it to this end of the trimmer wire. Back inside to the workstation, here is the brand new trim limit, sender, and wiring kit. It comes with 3 additional accessories, 2 wiring adapters, and this little clip right here. That will secure the trim limit wiring to your water tube or hose. And in this video, we will not be doing that because we are not at that stage yet. Your kit also comes with instructions. I recommend reading those. And we will need these 2 adapters when it comes time to securing the wiring back to the engine where that mount is. Let's head back out to the boat. Back in the garage to the back of the boat, and as you can see, we have taped, again color-coded, orange for trim limit, white for trim sender, onto their respective string trimmer line. And we are going to carefully pull it from the inside of the boat through that hole right there. And again, I did about 6 to 7, maybe 8 inches of tape to ensure that it does not come disconnected. In addition, the new cable has those connections we cannot cut off, so it is a little bit of larger diameter or bulge on the top portion there because again, those connections. We are now back outside the boat, and now that we have pulled the wiring through, I want to talk about these 2 pieces. Again, in the old wiring kit, they were black, but with the new kit, they're white, and Mercruiser calls these halves. And the way they work, again, each wire has a half of this fitting, and when secured inside that hole up above, it will go in as shown right here, and it will create a watertight seal. However, before moving on, I want to show you the gap in between each of the halves and the pre-installed from the manufacturer protector here. You've got a small gap, and what is that for? To insert this clip. Make sure you insert it properly, and trim sender will go in first, as shown here, and trim limit will go in second. And once they're through, again, when you screw this in tight, it's going to create that watertight seal. Now let's go back in the boat and unwrap the wiring and remove all that electrical tape. Back inside the boat and to the port side, I have removed the orange electrical tape that I used to pull the trim limit wiring through. And again, here's the connections. And per our service manual, again, it does not matter which connection goes into which fitting, but you want them secured, as shown there. They should make a clicking sound. Now to the starboard side, trim sender wiring, I have removed the white electrical tape, and that is where these fittings or adapters come into play. And I will start with this one, secure that into place, and again, it should make a clicking feeling or sound. And the second one. Really push them in there, but don't damage them. To the back of the boat, and unfortunately, an annoying and tricky part. What we have to do is feed that wiring up to that hole, properly center the 2 halves together, and secure this plate with those 2 bolts. And just be patient and careful as you do this. And again, as I shift those two halves up and into that hole, I want to make sure that they are aligned properly, and I will secure the lower bolt first. DIYers, the bottom bolt is pretty easy, again with that adapter. Quick update, DIYers, I have got the top bolt in its early stages of being threaded in, and the way I did this was grab the bolt with these two fingers and basically pinch it, shift it up into place, and I use the back portion of my fingers to push that cover plate that we secure with the bolts inward toward the boat, just to get it as close to that threaded hole as possible. So then I could insert the bolt and just kind of feel around for about 5 to 10 seconds until it fell into place inside that threaded hole. And from there, I just used my two fingers to, again, carefully, without cross-threading it, turn it clockwise into the thread. And after that, back to my 7/16 inch wrench, and it is working very nice. Coming back inside, and I am making progress. One thing I want to show you is there is a gap in between the cover plate and transom, and it's getting pretty tough right now because we have tension on that inner two halves. And as you tighten these bolts, do them in sequence, meaning maybe 3 to 5 turns on the top one, come down to the bottom one, 3 to 5 turns, and that's going to help properly center the two halves as you secure the plate and create that watertight seal. And another update, DIYers, it took me every bit of 30 to 40 minutes to secure both of those bolts. Again, 7/16 in our case, ultimately securing that plate and pushing those two halves in place in that inner hole to create that watertight seal. And you can see braided wire, which will go inside the transom and bell housing area. And that is to protect the wiring as the outdrive engine is trimming up and down while it's out in the water and in use. Taking a step back, before we hop into the boat and secure the opposite side wiring, I do want to talk about those screws. And depending on what service manual you follow, will depend on whether or not it mentions to add or apply perfect seal or gasket maker to those bolt threads. In our case, our service manual did not call for it, but again, not a bad idea, but we chose not to do it because that stuff is extremely sticky and it can make a mess really quick if you're not careful. Again, we chose not to do it because our service manual did not call for it. Back inside the boat to the port side trim limit wiring, and I've used zip ties to re-secure everything. I cleaned it up just a little bit. I tied it to the back frame of the hydraulic pump in a much more organized manner, and leave a little bit of play in your zip ties so you can move your wiring pretty easily. Now let's hop to the starboard side. Starboard side, and I re-secured the electrical wiring and connection points, as well as ensuring that the trim sender wire connection points were the first to go on to mate flush with that block, as the old ones were like that. In addition, spent a couple minutes and used zip ties to organize the wiring to ensure that the wiring is not loose and dangling, nor is it touching the hot engine at all while we're out having fun on the water. Taking a step back, what we'll do next, DIYers, hopefully you're still with us, we'll hop to the opposite side and we'll go get that 44-inch water hose and water tube, as well as the clamps, and install it and secure it inside to the workstation. And check this out, we've got our brand new 44-inch hose, and in comparison with the old one, which is on top with the clamp still installed, you will notice it's much longer. Again, as mentioned before, we will need to make a cut, and down below in the comment section as well as description section are cutters to cut that hose, and you want as clean and straight of a cut as possible. And we are going to use the original clamps. In our case, either a 5/16 socket, which we have on the ratchet, or a flathead screwdriver to loosen those up and remove them from the old hose. In addition, links down below in the comment section as well as description section will be there to purchase new parts. This is the cover. There's the old one. Here's the old bushing we cut. There's the water tube. Here's the brand new bushing. Here's the part number and bushing. And one side of the hose will connect to the water tube that's inside the boat, and the opposite end of the hose will feed all the way up to the top of the engine and into the thermostat. And then this portion right here will feed through the hull of the boat and into the transom and connect to an additional rubber hose, which is 3/4 inch size, and feed all the way to this fitting right here, which goes right inside there. However, I'm going to reposition the camera and extend these hoses as straight as possible to get a proper measurement of the old hose. And I did just that. As you can see, got the tape measure, and I used that tool to basically straighten it out just a bit. I'm showing 34 and maybe 5/8, just shy of 35 inches. We are going to make a cut on the brand new hose, maybe about 37 inches. And then if it's too long inside the boat, as it probably will be with 37 inches, we can cut away the excess to make a perfect length for the connections. The last thing you want to do is cut it too short in the beginning and have to buy a new hose. DIYers, that would not be fun. And as far as the hose number, there it is. This will also be down below in the comment section as well as description section on where to purchase that. At this point, I've placed the brand new hose between the tape measure and old hose. And I am going to cut around the 37, maybe 38. 38 might be too long. But again, I want to cut longer and work my way back as opposed to too short and not have the option to extend the hose. Time to cut. I've grabbed the tool, and to unlock it, just pinch in and up on the little locking latch here. Go ahead and stow that. And here is the cutting tool. Check that out. And the tool itself has a circular mold to it to allow you to grab the circular hose and position it inside this little cutout to give you a clean cut with the blade as it makes its way through the hose. So again, I'm going to cut around 37, maybe 37 and a half right there and work my way back. Well, maybe 38 just to be safe. Really sink that hose inside the circular cutout here as shown and grab a hold of the handle and cut. Tape measure fell, but I don't think I need it at this point. And I'll set that aside. And again, got about 3, maybe 3.5, 4 inches more with the new hose, and we'll work ourselves back. Next, I'll go ahead and carefully lock the tool, set that aside. And I'm going to grab my ratchet and socket. I've got the 5/16 socket on it. And again, you can use a flathead screwdriver or a 5/16 ratchet. And I'm just going to loosen up these clamps and remove them from the hose. And I might clean them up just a little bit before I install them on the new hose. Now to the opposite side. Next, I installed the original or old clamps on the hose. Just clean them up a bit. Again, those are the old ones. And I went about 2 inches in to the hose and secured them. What we'll do next is open up the new cover and bushing. And we need to prep that water tube for installation in the boat. At this point, I've got the new parts unpackaged. Here is the new bushing. And again, here's the old one we cut off. New cover, old cover. We are going to use the original bolts. I will swap those over to the new cover now. And I'm going to remove the old cover and old bushing and throw those away. From here, let's head back to the boat, install the water tube, bushing, cover, and that long hose we just cut. Back to the boat and to the transom. And in regards to how you slide this water tube into place, the inner portion will angle up and the outer portion will angle to the 9 o'clock position or face the 9 o'clock position. And go inside the hole carefully. And basically, that's all you have to do. From here, we'll go inside the boat and install the bushing and cover. Back inside the boat and coming to where the water tube comes through the transom and hull. Again, verify it is positioned in a way where that side of the water tube is angled or facing up. Next, DIYers, it is time to lubricate and install the new bushing on the water tube. And I'll scroll the camera out just a bit, and we are going to use the SAE 90 gear lube. And all I will do with the cap on, obviously, is tip it upside down and tip it back upright, remove the cap, and I will use just gear lube that attached to the inner portion of the cap to lubricate the bushing. And I'm going to go inside the bushing, and this is going to allow us to slide it on the water tube very nicely. I'm also going to lubricate the outer portions, and that will help the cover create a watertight seal. Bushing is now lubricated. Camera is not positioned to show you the water tube again as it makes its way through the transom and the hull. You want to make sure it is in the angled up position as shown here. Next, we'll grab the bushing, and here's the bushing. And DIYers, take note of the position of the bushing to ensure you install it on the water tube properly. The larger portion diameter of the bushing will be closest to the inboard engine, and as the bushing extends outward and gets smaller in diameter, that portion will go inside the hole and face the transom and outdrive. And again, when we put that cover on and secure it with the 2 bolts, it will create that watertight seal. Bushing is now on, and all I'm going to do is slide it down. I'm going to do my best to do it with one hand so I can show you what I'm doing. But it is tough, it may need both hands. All right, at this point, I've slid the bushing onto the water tube as shown here. The tube is still in the upright or angled up position, and not sure if you can hear it, but it is raining hard right now. Thank goodness we're in a garage. So again, from here, we'll grab the cover, and when installing the cover, I'm going to position it where the part number will be on bottom as shown there. Next, we'll bolt it in place, and this can be a little tricky. Just bear with me as I align this and begin screwing it in. Do not cross thread these bolts. That would not be good. Take your time, be precise. At this point, I've begun to hand tighten both of the bolts, top and bottom. And from here, we'll grab a ratchet and socket and tighten these in sequence. And what I mean by that is 2 to 3 turns on the top bolt, and then 2 to 3 turns on the bottom bolt, back up to the top, 2 to 3, down to the bottom, 2 to 3 turns. And by doing that, it will properly seat the inner bushing to again create that watertight seal. And I find it easier just to use a deep socket without the ratchet just yet. Now transitioning to the ratchet and socket, 7/16 size in our case. Now to a close-up, making progress. Those bolts are secured and that bushing has created that watertight seal. Now let's go back outside of the boat to the transom and see how the opposite end of the water tube is positioned. And if it's too far in or too far out, we can adjust it. To the water tube. You want a gap in between the bottom portion of your water tube and the top portion housing here that the gimbal bearing secures into, as well as a gap in between the rear portion of the transom and the water tube. And the reason being is because you need that space to install that brand new rubber water hose when it comes that time. And take a quick view of the bushing inside that hole that again creates that watertight seal at that point inside the transom. Taking a step back, in fact, I'll grab my brand new water hose and I'm going to insert it inside here just to ensure that this hose has the clearance to attach onto that water tube. In our case, it does have the clearance both on bottom, on top, and on either side of that tube. However, we are not going to install the hose at this point. I'll take that off. We'll head back inside the engine and attach that long hose to the opposite end of this water tube. Now to the top of the inboard engine, and the way I'm going to insert this hose is right through this gap, and I'll just slide this all the way back through. Again, when it comes to that point where that inner loop or hook is, you want to make sure you slide it inside there. And I'll continue sliding that hose to the back portion where that water tube is. And again, as you slide this hose through that hook or loop, you need to take that clamp off, because that clamp will not make it easy, or in other words, it may make it impossible to slide this hose into position where you need it. And once I get the hose all the way back down to the water tube, I'll slide that clamp back on. With the hose in position, I'm going to grab some SA90 gear lube, same gear lube that we use to lubricate that inner bushing, and that will help us slide that hose on much more efficiently. And you will notice this little wire right here, that is for our trim sender, and I'm bringing the hose underneath it, and I'm going to carefully slide the hose on the water tube. At this point, the hose is now in position on the water tube, and get a good feel where that water tube is inside the hose. You want to do your best to slide that hose as far onto the tube as possible, basically where it makes the turn here. And if you can carefully slide it on further, great, but do not break your plastic water tube. From here, I will slide the clamp down, and you see a little bulge or beveled portion. That is the end portion of the water tube. I'm going to slide the clamp, and I may need to loosen it up just to slide it over that bulge. And in between the bulge and the end of the hose, go ahead and tighten your clamp. And I want to position the clamp in a way where it makes it easy to screw it on tight, as well as loosen it to remove it down the road when it comes time to service this. And again, we have a 5/16, and I'll tighten that. You want it snug, but DIYers do not over tighten this, because you do not want to rip the hose nor crack the water tube. And a close-up of the finished product. Again, do not over tighten that clamp. You'll run into ripping the hose or cracking the tube. Not good. To the opposite side of the engine. And there is a view from this end going all the way down to the water tube. And as it makes its way to the top of the engine, again, it goes through that loop or hook and to the opposite end of the hose. Again, we cut long so we could work our way back, as opposed to the other option, cutting too short and not having the option. And what we'll do is maybe cut off 2 inches and slide it in place and see if that works. And again, looking down below where the fitting is right here, I want to cut my way back. And keep in mind, you don't want the hose just to come flush with the outer portion of the fitting. You want the hose long enough to go onto the fitting and slide all the way back to the stopping point, basically at the 90-degree angle turn on this elbow fitting. You can't see it now, but I'll show it to you here shortly. That's how much I took off, about 2 inches. And I want to maneuver this hose in a way where I can get it into this area here. And as far as the cut, it looks pretty good. However, first, just like the opposite end, I'll use some gear lube to lubricate that fitting to help slide the hose on. And sorry if I get in your way. Now to a close-up. And again, I need to position that clamp here shortly, but I want to show you down below. Here is that 90-degree angle elbow fitting right here, and I have positioned the hose all the way onto the fitting and flush with the stopping point of the elbow. Basically this big block right here where it makes the turn and makes its way into the thermostat, as shown here. From here, I will loosen up this clamp and I will slide it over and into place and secure the hose. Clamp in place, and I am tightening it. Again, do not over tighten it, you will damage the hose. And here's where I have positioned the clamp to allow me to access it from this angle of the engine. Back down below where the elbow is, and you can see as far as where the clamp is positioned, there is a small portion of hose in between the clamp and the elbow fitting, and that is what you want. As well as the fitting itself that extends outward and makes that bulge. It's right there on the outer portion of the clamp. And as far as the hose, again, it is inside that loop, and no portion of this hose is touching the hot portion of the engine, which will only extend the life of this hose. Back to the transom, it is now time to install our brand new water hose and clamp to the internal water tube. I'll position everything and show you what it looks like. However, first we need to install the brand new clamp, and take note of how I have this position when I get it in there. As shown there. Once we get the hose in place and onto that water tube, we can slide that clamp over the hose and secure it tight. Taking a step back, and with the new water hose in hand, I want to show you this white line. What you want to do when you slide this hose onto the actual water tube, you'll notice the discoloration is about 1 inch in, and that's where you want to slide the hose on. And this white line from the tip of the tube back is about 1 inch. So again, slide this hose all the way onto the tube until the end of that tube or beveled portion is making a bulge at the end of this white line closest to my thumb. And just like the opposite end, I am going to dab some gear lube and just lubricate to make it easier to slide that hose onto the tube itself. From here, it's all about patience. This tube itself, again, in our case, Alpha 1 Gen 1, we've got 3/4 inch tube, and it comes in this shape here. If you've got the 5/8 hose, it comes straight. And this hose is pretty thick, and it'll be tough to maneuver on the left side of the gimbal insert. But be patient, be precise, and get it on the water tube properly and securely. And as you do this, you may need to just rotate the hose back and forth and apply upward and inward pressure. Easier said than done, I'm sure. As you can see, ours is going on and sliding right on. Let me scroll in. Again, just rocking it back and forth. I'm applying upward pressure down here near this point right here, and I'm using my left hand to push this hose upward. And by doing that, it's sliding on the tube pretty easily because, again, we've lubricated it. You can see it moving. And the beveled portion is right there. From here, I'm going to slide the clamp on and secure it. And as far as where I position the clamp, I want it to be dead center on that white line. Coming inside to a close-up view of the clamp and connection point of the hose. As you can see, I've got the clamp as best centered as I possibly could on that white line. And again, the water tube itself, that plastic tube, extends out, and the bevel part is right here, just a hair outside or past this white line. So when it comes time to tighten the clamp and secure the hose, again, you want to make sure the clamp is on the inner portion of that bevel lip. That's on the end of the tube. And in regards to the clamp, again, you want it snug, but do not over tighten it. You could rip the hose, or even worse, you could break the water tube. And again, you do not want that. And as far as the water tube, again, ours is positioned to the left side of the gimbal housing there, and will extend outward. And this portion here will extend to the inner portion of the bell housing and secure to the water fitting. And DIYers, that is where we are going to wrap up part 4. Again, we hope the video helped, and we hope you're still with us. Scrolling above right now, as well as down below in the comment section, as well as the description section, will be a link to part 5. Definitely check that out. We'll pick up right where we left off, because again, DIYers, we have a lot more to do. We are going to transition back inside of the workstation and begin prepping that bell housing with the bellows to get it ready to go back on this transom and gimbal ring. Again, we hope to see you there. From here, do us a favor below the video. You will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.